Welcome to the Fit Dad Club podcast. My name is Travis Jones. I'm here with Jason Barrett today, and we are talking all things fat loss and body transformation for dads. Jace, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. I'm ready to bust some myths wide open and get rid of some of the BS in the industry.
Exactly, man. I think that's the podcast topic we're going to cover today. It's all about myths. It's all about maybe some of the misconceptions that the dads out there have on how to lose fat and transform their body. I talk to a lot of dads who think they have to do cardio or have to eat low calories or go low carb. You know, so many guys that I've trained over the last so many years, you know, allow them to have beers and some burgers and, you know, have some at-home pizzas. And they're like, wow, I'm losing more weight than I ever have in my life. I'm eating, you know, more food. I'm eating more carbohydrates. It's like, this is insane. You know, I only have to train 3 hours a week. Like, I thought I had to, you know, run every day. So I think today is going to be a great one for you to, if you're driving, you know, listen and then write some notes, or if not, get a pad out and pen, or just listen clearly and carefully of, you know, what stuff that you shouldn't really be wasting your time on, because we only have so many hours in the day. And I don't want you to waste those precious hours on doing shit that just does not work. So, Chase, what do you reckon is a top myth that you've heard in the fitness industry?
Well, I reckon the biggest one, because I used to sell supplements, right? I used to be in a supplement selling company. We would buy and resell, not any of those, you know, not quote unquote supplements, but legitimate ones. And the biggest thing that people would come to me for was fat burning supplements and fat loss supplements. Yeah. They would, it's so pervasive. The idea that there's going to be a powder or a pill that you're going to take that's going to dramatically increase the amount of fat you burn or make sure that you build muscle or whatever it is, right? It's like anything that's going to have anywhere near the effect that you want it to have is going to be probably illegal and injectable, right? So when you're considering the marketing that goes behind these things, right? They've got people who are already jacked, who are already shredded, who are already huge, doing all this stuff like, oh yeah, I take, you know, InnoShred or Hydroxyburn or whatever it is. The best ingredient that you can take for fat loss, the best supplement is pretty much caffeine, right? It give you enough caffeine where you get jitters and you shake around a bit. Yeah, that's going to burn a lot of calories, right? It's going to give you a little bit more energy. You're going to be a little bit more fat burning, but even that is minuscule. So any marketing, any supplement that is telling you it's going to burn more fat, it's going to help you build muscle, it's going to be a furnace and you're going to shred, like they use all that language that's so evocative, like, oh yeah, I'm going to turn into a fat burning furnace and it's going to melt off. It's like, no, it's not. It's not going to do shit. And even more so, it's not going to do shit in comparison to a poor diet, right? Like, this will help you lose weight in conjunction with a regular diet and exercise. Well, a regular diet and exercise is going to help you lose that fat anyway. So it's just that little placebo effect that you think you're getting a result from it, but you're not. So anyone that's trying to sell you a supplement that is going to burn you any level of extra fat is a complete BS artist. Just please don't buy it.
Mate, I completely agree. I think when we look at it, caffeine being the biggest legal supplement, especially in Australia. Obviously, if you're in another country, there's your Himbine HCl that actually does have some benefits. If we're looking at back in the day, they used to sell, when I lived in Canada, there was like an ECA stack, which is ephedrine, caffeine, and aspirin. And you'd take that. That definitely did work. So that's not in Australia. And neither's your Himbine. And I think... So when we're looking at the Australian market, and if you are in the other countries, hey, go for it. But if you're looking in the Australian market, obviously go see your doctor first so you don't have a heart attack. But caffeine's the biggest thing. And then people say, oh, no, but I've taken this green tea, caffeine, you know, fat loss powder, and it helped me sweat so much more in my workout. It's like, well, sweat doesn't mean you're burning more fat, guys. Like, there's no direct correlation between sweat and fat loss. Okay. So we need to understand, okay, what is going to actually help? Hey, mate, like, get a pre-workout. If you don't want to buy a pre-workout, drop a couple of no-dos, like literally some caffeine, just get them straight into your system. Do it about, 20, 30 minutes before your workout, and you'll be smashing it out. And you probably get some sweat as well. Do a double espresso or a triple espresso before you work out. You get 150 milligrams of caffeine in there as well. That is, when we're looking at the actual research behind things, like caffeine is really the only legal supplement, especially in Australia, that is going to increase your metabolism, slightly to help you aid in fat loss. And the only thing that, the best supplement, to be honest, obviously with fat loss is a calorie deficit. If you're in a calorie deficit, you lose fat. And that's what we have to look at. So, we look at the hierarchy of importance. Adherence is, number one to lose weight. Calories is second. Third is making sure we're hitting our protein correctly. Above that, we have a bit of meal timing. It's really just like it's a small percentage. And above that, there's supplements. So it's honestly the last thing that we need to be looking at, but it's the first thing that people actually do look at. So cut the BS, drop the fat burning supplements. We just saved you at least $100 a month and probably $1,200 a year. So you can go to fit-dad.club and book in a consultation form, and we can do you some coaching and actually get you the results if you like. But that is the number one. Myth at the end of the day. People think that I need a fat burning supplement. No, you don't. You just need a calorie deficit. Now,
I think it's probably the most heavily bought into for the least result. There are other myths that are out there that look, still have a relative positive benefit. They still have a bit of, there's a bit of merit to still doing them, and they'll probably get you results. But to me, it's just number one because it's the biggest waste of money for the least amount of results. Oh,
mate, 100%. Next one, I get asked this a lot as well. It's like, I just want to get rid of my belly fat. I was like, I'll talk to someone and like, yeah, I'm 90 kilos, but I don't want to lose weight. I just want to get rid of my belly fat. Okay. Well, there's no exercise that targets reduction of belly fat, right? So we have to look at, there is fat loss and there is muscle gain. If we're doing work, essentially direct core-based work, building our abs, that is not going to help you lose fat. We can't target our abs to drop the fat. We can target them to build and hypertrophy and build the muscle. But if you just got a gut on top of it, you're still going to have a gut. So we have to drop the fat and then gain the lean muscle mass. The same as like you've got, you don't like all of a sudden start doing bicep curls and you're dropping the fat off your arm. No, you're building your bicep. It's exactly the same thing. So there's no specific exercise. And that's why people say, oh, there's not much core stuff. We're not doing too many ab crunches inside the workouts. It's like, no. We're doing squats, we're doing deadlifts, we're doing lunges, we're doing pressing movements. Why? Because they're the biggest compound movements. They're going to help you build lean muscle mass, which then, and also burn the most calories, which then is going to help you drop fat faster than you're laying on the ground and doing some form of Jane Fonda, Gene Simmons ab style crunch. We not Gene Simmons. What's the guy? Gene. Oh no, he sold a lot of things back in the day as far as his aerobics. We're not doing Gene. Backing up the wrong thing. We're not doing Gene Simmons. It wasn't. He was like, you could do a lot of coke. I think he burned some fat that way. But that could be another fat loss supplement. Go back up there.
Yeah, exactly.
But mate, do you ever get asked that? Can I target my fat, my love handles, my back fat, or anything like that?
Yeah, it is another pervasive one. Everyone, and especially for guys, right? Like biologically, everyone's going to hold fat in different places. That's going to be resultant of your genetics, right? Like if you look at, not to go into it too deep, but to different, different races and different nationalities, you'll tend to see that people will, from a genetic standpoint, will hold weight differently from different genealogies. Like I'll notice a lot of people who are like islanders, like, you've got New Zealand, people from Hawaii, they'll tend to hold a lot of their fat more so in their lower body and their legs than they will, in other places, right? Whereas for a lot of Westerners, it'll tend to be around those sort of love handles, right? They'll kind of be relatively evenly distributed. It'll be more like love handles and like lower belly. And if you think about your body as like, if you think about from the top and then from the bottom, as you lose fat, it'll tend to kind of concertina down, and it'll like from your head down and from your feet up, it'll meet in the middle somewhere. And that's basically going to be like the last place that you lose body fat, and like everything else will lean out until it's at that point. And there might come a point where it's just, if you want to get that little bit of extra body fat off down the very bottom, it might be just an unsustainable, unrealistic level of body fat for you to hold at, and that's okay. But you've just got to know that with enough time and enough effort, right, you build enough muscle and you lose enough body fat, the skin will stretch tight. That's what creates the appearance of abs. You have enough muscle mass and you have a low enough body fat that the skin stretches tight over your abs. If you lose a hell of a lot of weight, it might take a bit of time for that skin to tighten up again. but there's nothing that you can do to say, I'm going to burn fat in this specific area. Your body kind of already determines that. So you've just got to keep on going until you hit the point where you're happy with. And if that's beyond what you're comfortable with doing for from a long-term plan perspective, then it might just not be worth it. And then it's just about accepting that, yeah, I'm never going to have the shredded dick abs, the veiny abs that go all the way down. But maybe you're going to have some real fantastic quads. You're going to have some, striations there. You got to own what you've got.
Exactly, mate. Just start wearing the budgie smugglers and get the quads out.
Exactly.
So I think I tell most of my guys it's like a squeezing out toothpaste, right? So it's like it comes down face visually first, then neck, then you get your arms, and then like your chest is leaning out, then it comes to the top of the abs, and then all of a sudden you start seeing the shoulders pop because you have a clear distinction between bicep to deltoid. So the shoulders start coming out like cannonballs on your shoulders, and then it sort of starts squeezing its way down to middle abs, and then those lower abs sort of start to level out. You got a flat stomach, and then as you get leaner, it's all of a sudden the abs start to pop more and more. I think when we're looking at it, that's generally how most guys go. The reason why we do carry predominantly, and it does depend on, some backgrounds, but it's because there's less blood flow around the gut or at the end of the day. So with the higher amounts of blood flow, to oxidize fat or to lose fat, what we need to do is we need to have high blood flow, right? So that's why we lose higher amounts of fat in different areas first. And then lower blood flow, well, that's where we mobilize fat the slowest. It comes down to alpha receptors and beta receptors and the catecholamines attaching to it. So we have higher amounts of alpha receptors around the gut as males. Females have it more around their thighs and their hips. That's why, generally speaking, they carry more fat in their thighs and hips. So it's like, okay, we know that this is what happens. I just want to lose it off my fat. It's like, no, man, you got some man boobs. We need to lose those first. At the end of the day, we need to drop fat, and doing all the crunches isn't going to help. Doing a calorie deficit and some strength training definitely will, because we want to maintain as much muscle mass as possible whilst we're dropping fat, because that is the key. And I think this is the segue into the next myth, right? The next myth I would say is, hey, Jace, am I supposed to be running an hour a day and that's how I lose fat? What's the best training to lose fat? Isn't it just cardio?
Yeah, running is the key, man. You just go for a jog, just jog on. No, so this is a big one that a lot of guys, they'll put rules and they'll put ideas around, well, you have to run to get, to lose fat, because it's a nice idea. And this is the problem, that a lot of people who want to pitch their way of training, their way of diet, their book, whatever it might be, is they'll focus in on what is, logically that makes sense. That's a really nice idea. Yeah, because I'm exhausted and I sweat a lot when I'm running. And we already talked about that sweat doesn't equal fat loss, right? It's, otherwise people could just sit in a sauna all day and burn fat. It's like, there's a little bit of an effect, but not the amount you think. You just live in a hot country, right? You get nervous and you sweat. Doesn't mean you're getting fit. So people think that just running is such a big one, and they'll just say, I'm just going to go for a run, because it has a visceral response. You feel really good. You go for a jog. You're just like, oh yeah, like I feel like I'm doing something good. It's this placebo effect that goes on in your head, and that's what a lot of people capitalize on. But at the end of the day, no one particular form of movement is going to be best from an energy expenditure perspective, from like a fat loss perspective. If you're equating for time and you're equating for effort, at the end of the day, no movement in particular is the best. But resistance training trumps cardio from a fat loss perspective, not because it burns more fat, but because it helps us retain and keep more muscle. The principle I talk about here is, if you don't use it, you lose it. Your body operates the same way. So if you're in a calorie deficit, your body's looking for fuel. Where does it get that fuel from? It gets what you've already got, your fat stores. If you don't have enough fat stores, or you're in a fairly big deficit, it's also going to look to things like organ mass and muscle mass for energy. Now, this is where the principle of, if you don't use it, you lose it, comes in. If you're running a lot, you might maintain your level of muscle mass in your calves and your hammies and your glutes and your quads for a little bit, because you're using them constantly. But you're not necessarily you're challenging one type of muscle fiber, but you're not challenging others. And you're not challenging anything in your upper body. You're not using, in essence, the muscle mass and the muscle fibers in your upper body. Whereas resistance training, weight training, if you're using that, if you're doing that consistently, you're essentially signaling to your body, hey, we need to keep this muscle mass around. It's useful. It's doing shit, right? I'm doing push-ups. I'm doing, shoulder presses. I'm doing rows. I'm doing pull-ups, all that kind of stuff. You're signaling to your body to have some more muscle protein synthesis. You're signaling to it to build muscle, to retain as much muscle as possible because, hey, we're using this. It's important. You don't get that with just cardio. You don't get that with just running. You're challenging only one type of muscle fiber and you're challenging it in one certain way for a small period of your body. And you're just getting your heart rate up there, which, look, from a cardio perspective, yeah, plenty of benefits. Same with any type of cardio, right? You still want to include that from a general health and well-being perspective. But for fat loss, if you're not incorporating some kind of resistance training, you're leaving gains on the table. You're leaving potentially, like, let's say you lose 800 grams a week, for example. 400 grams of that might be body fat, and let's say 400 grams of that is muscle mass if you're going for cardio. If you introduce weight training, you might end up with 600 grams of that being fat and then 200 grams of that being muscle mass because you've shifted the ratio, which means you're going to hit your goals quicker. At the end of it, you're going to look a hell of a lot better and you're going to have retained more muscle, which is better all around for all of your goals, right? No such thing as too much muscle, right? Unless you get on the anabolics and then you can't wipe your own ass, but that's a different story.
Yeah, man. I think I honestly agree. I think when we look at it, I normally tell the way I explain it to people is like we diet to lose fat, we train to preserve muscle. So that's when we're looking in a body fat loss phase. So we're dieting, and our dieting is all around losing that fat mass, and we're training to preserve as much muscle as possible. I go, okay, well then which type of training preserves our muscle the best? Well, going for a spin class or doing some yoga is not going to help that. Doing some weight training definitely is. So we preserve the muscle mass as our body is becoming catabolic, right? So our body is breaking itself down. So if we're eating enough protein, which gives us amino acids, and we're actually doing resistance training to put stress on the muscle, we're going to retain that muscle, then we're going to lose fat primarily in the fat loss process, rather than if we're not putting stress on the muscle mass and we start doing fucking Weight Watchers and we're just losing weight, all of a sudden you're an apple, your body shape, and then all of a sudden you're just a smaller apple. You end up being a skinny fat version of yourself rather than a fat version of yourself. And no one wants to be skinny fat. No one I ever talk to. If I said to them, it's like, hey, dude, I can get you some abs. I can get you some shoulders and some arms. Would you like it if I could click my fingers? They would say yes. So in the reality is everyone would like a little bit of muscle mass. Everyone wants to feel strong, and everyone does want to feel somewhat lean. You don't get lean. You don't get strong going for a run, and you don't get lean going for a run. And we don't get build that lean muscle mass going for a run either. So cardiovascular exercise is good to burn a few more calories. But that is, again, if we're looking at the supplements, okay, when we talked about that earlier, that's the top of the pyramid. If we're looking at the bottom of our pyramid as far as our training, it's like, okay, we've got to have adherence. Okay, next we need to have some weight training. We need to put some resistance against the muscles. And then we can start sprinkling on top of that a little bit of cardio for a bit of heart health and to burn a couple of extra calories. And that's the biggest thing I want to look at. It's like, and also it's the best as far as weight training, when we're looking at time. So it's 45 minutes of training. We can always lift about that two reps in reserve or 2 reps from failure, and your strength can always go up. And with our running, we have to run longer and longer. So our training actually has to start extending the amount of time we're training for to burn a similar amount of calories. So if we look at it, lift some weights, pick things up, put them back down, and then start picking up heavier things and putting them back down as well. And that is the myth busted for cardio is great for fat loss. Next is high reps, low weight for fat loss. Now, I actually still get asked this. No, it's like, and even with guys, it's like, shouldn't we be doing high reps, like 20 reps, and doing low weight? For me, I look at this. So optimal lean mass, okay? So we want to put stress against the muscle. We always want to be training mainly between 2 reps in reserve, which means 2 reps before you fail. If it says 15 reps and you can lift 17 reps and then you'd collapse, that's 2 reps from failure or 2 reps in reserve. So if it says 12 reps and 2 reps in reserve, it means you could have lifted 14. So you can build muscle all the way up to 30 reps to 35 reps. You can build muscle at 6 reps. You can build muscle at 12 reps. It doesn't matter. But when we start going on to the lower end of the rep range, what happens is it starts hitting our nervous system even more. So when we start doing strength protocols and we start lifting really heavy, our nervous system gets a bit fried, and then we get to fatigue easier, especially with like newer beginner lifters. So I definitely wouldn't suggest that. And if we're doing like 30 to 35 reps of an exercise and we're doing it 2 reps from failure, imagine jumping on a leg press or doing back squats, 2 reps from failure at 30 to 35 reps. The reason why we don't do that is it is vomit inducing. Okay. It will make you hate your workout, not want to turn up to the gym, and fucking never come back. You're like, this is not for me. So the real reason, right, we stick somewhere between 8 to 15 reps for most of the programming is purely due to the fact that, one, it's not too much on the nervous system, and it's not too much on the vomit inducing. We still stay 2 reps in reserve, and we can have adequate form through those rep ranges as well. And that's the true muscle building zone for no other reason than the fact that it's the comfortable zone of, okay, I can do this. And, going 2 reps from failure isn't going to make me nervous system fry or want to vomit. And if we're looking at that doesn't mean high reps help you lose weight faster or low reps help you lose weight faster. Remember, we train to preserve muscle. So which is the rep range which allows us to preserve muscle the most? Somewhere between that 8 to 15. As long as you're hitting somewhere between 1 to 3 reps in reserve, 1 to 3 reps from failure is exactly the amount of reps and the amount of weight that you should be lifting. And every single person is different as far as how much weight they lift, because that comes out to, where you are in your training age.
Yeah, 100%. Like everyone's going to have a different, that's why we don't judge people for how much weight they lift. Like I would go in the gym. There's definitely some upper body movements I can do that are better than my lower body at the moment because I've had some lower back challenges and I'm focusing a lot more on mobility. Like I even saw a PT in the gym the other day. I was doing squats on the Smith machine because using the Smith machine, I'm able to get a vertical back angle so that my lower back doesn't come into it. And it's like all quad. You got to think about the exercises you're doing for the purpose that they're built for. There might be some exercises where, like if I was doing a like chest flyers and I was doing it for a sets of 6, like on the cables, that's not really going to hit my chest as much as it probably is like my shoulders and my abs and like trying to just bring this thing forward. But for me, higher reps on that, I'd smoke my chest. And that's the point of that exercise. If you are doing exercises in a way where they train different muscles than what you want, like if you're doing a set of 25 squats, you probably have to go with such a light weight that your quads are going to be fine, but your core, your back, your everything else is just going to be like, your cardio is going to be gassed and you're going to want to vomit, but your quads like, oh, I could do more because you only had 30 kilos on me and there's what the fuck am I meant to do? So think about what muscles you're trying to train when you're training them, and it's like, am I getting the response out of this? Like if you're benching and you're feeling your shoulder, that's not exactly ideal, right? If you're doing pull-ups and you're feeling only your biceps, it's like, all right, well, we want to try and hit the muscles that we want to hit. That's why we do the exercises that we do, so we get a nice spread of exercise. The higher reps, as Trav was saying, all they do is they build up a shit ton of metabolites. You're going to get sore as hell. No one can tell me that they could do 30 good reps of almost any exercise. You get, like in today's day and age, you get bored. Like, fucking hell, you take a break halfway through. Guess what? Then that's actually just 2 sets of 15. Yeah, that's the magic number. Yeah. But anywhere between that, you just got to find the range for each exercise that works for you, right? We have an ideal sort of set between 8 and 15 or so. It tends to be good for most people. Any more than 15, you start to get bored. You can't really complete that many good reps with a good mind muscle connection for everything that you're doing. And any less than sort of 8 or 6, then yeah, you're in that strength range where you're going to beat up your joints and your nervous system, and it's going to take your central nervous system time to recover before you can attempt doing that session again. And let's say you've got to train again in 2 days' time, you're beat up, you're exhausted, you can't give that session its all. So by no means do you have to do a crap ton of reps in order for you to build, in order for you to retain muscle and for you to lose body fat in essence. As long as you're, as Trav was saying, we're training to retain muscle and your focus is to retain muscle when you're training, that sort of range is going to be the best, and finding the one that works for you where you don't feel too beat up, right? That's why I don't do low rep, high weight anymore, because it beats up my lower back. It struggles from that perspective. So you got to find what works for you, but by no means is anything more than 15 necessary.
Dude, 100%. I think as we transition out of the myths around training, we're going to go into the myths around nutrition, right? And I think, we'll go through one of them as we go through one at a time. So I think the myth is like low-fat diets are the best for fat loss. And I think this was popularized a while ago, but still some people go towards a low-fat diet. And I think the biggest reason why people or the low fat diet was introduced is because there's macronutrients, there's protein, there's fats, and there's carbs. For every gram of protein, there's 4 calories. For every gram of carbohydrate, there's 4 calories. And for every gram of fat, there's 9 calories. So if we look at the three and we looked at this in isolation, it's like, whoa, okay, well, the macronutrient that contains the highest amount of calories is fats. That's like double. So I can eat more food if I just cut out the fats and I'll still lose weight. So when we look at it, that's one of the biggest reasons I believe that low-fat diets people thought are the best for fat loss, because it cuts out the most amount of calories with the minimal amount of effort. When reality is cheese is amazing. We don't want to cut out cheese. We don't want to cut out, like a good steak. We don't want to cut out a burger. We don't want to cut out these things with fats that actually make our food taste fantastic. So that, I believe, is the reason why low-fat diets came around. But if we start going below that sort of 15 to 20% of our total calories in fats, it starts to play with our hormone levels. So testosterone starts to decrease. All of a sudden, we start to feel like a bit less of a man. We start to, not be able to gain that lean muscle mass that we're after. So you can decrease fat slightly if you're a more carb-dominant person. You love having carbohydrates, but I really wouldn't go below that sort of 15 to 20% threshold. So that means if you have a 2,000-calorie diet, really don't go below that sort of 300 to 400 calories of fats would be the lower limit, which would be about 40 to 45 grams of fats on a daily basis. Have you got any thoughts around the low-fat diets, mate?
I think one thing to remember is that there are specific vitamins and minerals that are fat soluble as well. When you think about there's water soluble and there's fat soluble. Yeah. There's also alcohol soluble, but that doesn't mean we need to have red wine every night. But there are fat soluble vitamins and minerals that are important as well. So the fats and proteins are the only two where you tend to have a minimum recommended amount to hit. Like for proteins, there's essential amino acids. For fats, there's essential fatty acids. Right now, this is probably going to dovetail nicely into the next nutrition myth, but it's important for us to make sure we hit a minimum of fat and a minimum of protein. I agree. I think it came about because, fat is the most calorie dense. It's very easy if you cut out fat, and fats are probably the easiest thing to blow out on for a lot of people. When you think about just plain white rice, it's very hard to overeat. We think about, a plain pasta, hard to overeat, but you chuck in some cheese and some creamy sauce, all of a sudden you can smash a carbonara, bacon bits, all of that stuff. It creates an umptuousness. You want to have more of it. But in reality, it's the combination of highly palatable carbs and highly palatable fats that work together to create this food. I remember there was a book by Krista Scott Dixon, who's one of the founders and one of the lecturers, I think, for precision nutrition, does a lot of good stuff. But it was I think it was called Why Me Want to Eat. And it's the key to, gooey, yummy, fatty, chewy, crunchy food. It's all these little manufactured things to make your brain go, oh yes, I want this, right? And it's never one macronutrient. It's never just fats or just carbs. It's a combination of both, and textures and all of the other different shit that goes on with it. So there is no one evil, right? Fat was an easy one because it helps you cut out a lot of flavor. So when food tastes bland, you don't tend to overeat it. But as well, it cuts out a hell of a lot of calories because it tends to be what adds the most, right? If you go for a lean cut of beef over a fatty cut, right? You're having a chicken thigh with skin on versus a chicken breast. If you just make that swap, that automatically makes a hell of a big difference to your day. But then if you continue that over the long term, it doesn't tend to be the healthiest if you're dropping below the threshold. But that kind of dovetails nicely into the second one that I think a lot of people hear, and it's probably a hell of a lot more prevalent now, which is demonizing carbohydrates, or low carb is the way to do it because there's no essential carbohydrates. So why should we have them in our body?
Mate, 100%. I think when we look at this, it's normally because of the fact that someone's gone on a low carb diet. They're like, I lost so much weight. And it's like, dude, no, you lost glycogen, right? The average person stores around sort of 2 kilos to 3 kilos of glycogen inside their body. So if you start dropping carbohydrates, you go into a calorie deficit. In that first 7 days, you might lose 500 grams to a kilo of fat, but then you lose another 3 kilos in water weight. And you're like, oh shit, see, look, low carb diets work. It's like, no, you still lost the same amount of fat. You just lost a lot of water weight. And then when you add those carbohydrates back in, then you're going to put that weight back on. So again, when we look at it, it's like carbohydrates, obviously they aren't essential like fats and proteins, but they're great energy source, right? Like if we want to train hard, we want to have carbohydrates. We lean on carbohydrates for the glycogen for training. So I think in this, the low carb diets, again, it's the easiest thing to demonize a macronutrient and go, hey, you're not losing weight because of this one specific macronutrient. It's the carbohydrates, or it's the fat, or it's the protein, or it's the whatever it is, right? And I think if you look at it, it's like we're demonizing a food group. One, the worst thing it does is it leads to eating disorders. And now there's good and bad foods when there's no such thing as good and bad foods. And like, the second thing is like, man, like carbs taste great. Like I don't want to go my life without eating pizza. And I think, we need to go, okay, there is a certain amount of carbs that we can be eating, but we don't need to cut carbs to lose weight. We need to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight.
That's what every popular diet manages is. They are sneaky in the way that they do it, and they'll try and baffle you with their bullshit in order to get you to buy into it. And this is kind of where the idea, to me, of absolutism in any fitness endeavor is you've really got to be aware of. And it's unfortunate, it's sad, but all of the sexy answers are generally bullshit. All of this is the one way, the right way, the only way is bullshit. As much as most people don't want to hear it, the best answer that you can hear from your coach when you ask them a question is usually, it depends, right? That's the unsexy answer that I'll give 99.9% of the time to any question that's asked to me, because I mean, I'm a nerd on the details and the context, and all right, well, it depends. In this situation, this might be useful, but in this situation, depends on your lifestyle, depends on a lot of different things. Whereas some people will just say, oh yeah, because carbs the devil, right? Because fruit and grains are bad for you, right? All of this other bullshit. But there are like, if you think about, low carb because carbs are bad for you, fruits are predominantly mostly carbs, right?
Yep.
Pretty much all carbs.
Yep.
Right. If you are listening to someone who's telling you that fruits and vegetables are bad for you in this day and age, I got no words for you at this point.
Stop listening to them.
Yeah, exactly. They've got really good marketing behind them, and they take extra curricular supplements to look the way they look, and then lie about it. Right? Hashtag Liver King. Pretty much what happens with a lot of them. They'll preach absolutism, and this is the way it is, and this is really bad because of this, and these are the reasons why, whatever. But carbs are useful. Carbs are energy. Carbs have vitamins and minerals in them. Carbs oftentimes come with the highest amount of fiber as well, and they'll tend to be things that slow down digestion and keep us fuller for longer. I don't know about you. I have a bowl of oats in the morning, and mix that in with some protein powder. That fills me up for ages. Just the fiber and the nutritional value of it is quite high. But as you said as well, enjoyment is a factor of life. If you enjoy eating super low carb and you're like, I could just get by in life by just eating, I'll just have chicken thighs and I'm going to eat steak and I'm going to have eggs and even mix that with some avocado and veggies and whatever, and I'll enjoy life. Awesome. Good for you. Enjoy. I'm not about that life, right? I love carbs. I'm a carb man. It's a fact of life for me. I'm going to enjoy them, so I'm going to include them. They also provide you with a source of energy to hit those workouts really hard. If you can time it right and you have some carbohydrates before you train, right? If you have some carbohydrates after you train, frame them around your workout windows, you'll get far better performance out of yourself because you've got more readily available energy. And so it's not that there's no essential carbohydrates, but it is your body's preferred source of fuel. Right? If it has the choice between carbohydrates and fats and proteins, it'll choose carbs first. That's where a lot of people get the demonization wrong. They'll say, because carbs, if you take that away, then your body has no choice but to burn fat. And it's like, well, yes, that's true, but it'll burn dietary fat first. So if you're eating just a shit ton of fat in your diet, it'll burn all of that before it even bothers touching your body fat. So as long as you have a calorie deficit, it'll burn through your carbs and to say, what's next? All right, well, I'm going to convert body fat into glucose and I'm going to use that in glycogen, use that as energy. Yeah, cool. Simple. It's going to do it either way. Your body knows what it's doing. You can't trick or hack your biology as well as people will try and fool you into thinking you can, because you can't.
Mate, 100%. It's like when people say, or the studies like, oh yeah, look, if I go on a high fat diet like keto or something similar to that, then my body burns higher amounts of fats. Yes, it burns higher amounts of dietary fats. Doesn't burn the fat you're eating, not the fat that you're actually holding on your body. So both essentially are looking at a similar amount of fat loss. But I look at it like this, right? what's a diet that you're going to stick to the longest? Does it include carbs and fats in it? Yes, it does. Then let's stick on that diet, which is, including them in our diet and staying inside a calorie deficit, making sure we hit that protein goal that we talked about earlier as well. And I think, the last thing also, when we're looking at cutting out a food group as far as the myth, the biggest problem I see with this and why the myth needs to be busted is because if you're living your life trying to stay away from a certain food group, generally when you're out and about and you can't control your environment and you're at a friend's house, you're out for dinner or you're at a work lunch and it has just carbohydrates or it doesn't have keto-friendly meals or whatever it is, and then you do eat those carbs, then you start to feel like you've blown your diet. And then it leads to like this binge restrict kind of mentality, like, stuffed it. So then we just go all in on stuffing it. When really in the reality is if you can have those carbohydrates inside your nutrition and we don't blow it, we just track it, then it allows you to stick to your diet for longer, allows you then to not blow out your calories and you'll actually get the results you're looking for. And I think that's why that myth must be busted. Next one is you got to eat as little as possible. And I think, this comes down to like all the shake diets out there. I get a lot of guys who've started with us, they were on the man shake and they lost a little bit of weight and they just completely stopped. And there's a couple of reasons why. It's like, I am in two minds about this as well, mate. I think, you never saw people in the concentration camps when they were eating really little with high amounts of body fat. They just weren't. So you can eat small amounts of food and lose fat mass, but you're going to lose muscle mass at the same time. So that's why, again, I harp on about man. So make sure we eat enough protein, but also make sure we're not eating too little. So like they're on the shake diets or the man shake Monday to Friday, and because they ate so little, they get to the weekend and they go from zero to hero as far as the amount of calories they're eating, and their weekly deficit gets blown, and it's not a maintainable diet. And that's actually the only problem I have with it. I believe you can go for spurts in a very low calorie diet. I do believe this myself, without it ruining your metabolism or anything like that. But I don't believe someone should just go on super low calories if, one, they don't have a coach, two, they're not having enough protein, and three, they don't have a time frame they're going to go through this for, because it's like, this is where I am. This is my time frame. I can stick to it. Then I can increase my calories to more of a maintenance style calories. There was a study out there, it was called the Matador study. It was like a little bit more calorie deficit. They had brief intermissions of calorie maintenance. And it did give psychological, I guess, when we're on a low calorie diet and then we get to go to maintenance, psychologically, okay, we're going to hammer it for 6 weeks and then I get a bit of a break. Hammer it for 6 weeks, get a bit of a break, rather than constantly dieting. So there is some pros as far as going on calorie deficits, but the problem is most people don't do them right, and they just start eating small amounts of carrots and celery and salads and a couple of man shakes, which have got like 18 to 22 grams of protein in them. They have like 2 of them a day. The protein is not around, it has to be up around 2 grams of protein per kilo on around that the very low calorie diets. They're nowhere near 2 grams of protein per kilo. So muscle mass is wasted, and then we can't stick to it. We feel like shit. We end up being that skinny fat version of ourselves. And that's, again, not what we want. So sustainable dieting is what we actually want. And that's my thoughts around the myth of eat as little as you can.
Yeah, and the shake diets, they popularize it because it's easy, right? And I would say this dovetails kind of into the idea of intermittent fasting that a lot of people think, it's something that you have to do to lose weight. It is a lifestyle choice that if you can stick to it and if you can utilize it, is a very effective tool. Now, for me, if I just created a diet, right? I've eaten pretty much the same breakfast. I'm gonna pitch something to you, right? If I eat pretty much the same breakfast every single day, not because I have to, not because I'm forced to, but because I enjoy it and it's super high protein. But I'm going to call it the YoPro diet. So YoPro Gains diet. So every morning is hashtag sponsored. Yeah, YoPro sponsor me. I swear to God, I'll shill the shit out of you. Every day I have a serve of YoPro. I put in some kind of crunchy, usually it's like all brand to get my fiber up, but also just adds a bit of texture, right? Texture is important. Frozen berries and a scoop of protein powder. Pretty much have that every morning. It's like 50 grams of protein. It's maybe 40 grams of carbs, bugger all fat. It just gives me a really good start to the day. It's filling. It's got a bit of fiber. It's got vitamins and minerals from the berries. So hashtag health. But that is my breakfast every morning. Not because I feel like I have to, not because I'm forced to, but because I enjoy it. I could have this for breakfast every single day for the rest of my life. That doesn't make it a diet. That doesn't make it the best thing for everyone to do. But it is something that for me is a lifestyle choice that works. If you enjoy having a man shake or even like a protein smoothie or something in the morning, you don't have to call it a diet. And you don't have to be like, oh, I'm forced. This is the thing. There will be still times where I either have nothing or I might have some eggs on toast or whatever. That's basically be the only two things I tend to have for breakfast. There might be times when I do that, and that's okay. But just because you do something every single day doesn't mean that's the only way it has to be. Doesn't mean that it's a diet. Doesn't mean that it's the most effective. But if you enjoy it and it works for you, awesome. Cool, no problem with it. My only criticism, probably similar to Trav, is I would probably get a bit more protein in there if you can. I'd blend it up in a smoothie with some fiber and some extra protein would be my recommendation. But apart from that, no issue with it. But the other issue with going on very low calorie diets is you tend to not have the energy to train hard, and you tend to not have the energy to push hard enough. And there's actually been studies that show that people who tend to eat closer to maintenance will burn more calories in a training session because they have more energy. So when you go to a very, very low calorie diet, as Trav said as well, it's very fatiguing mentally to be like, because you're basically starving. You're constantly thinking about food. You're like, fuck, when can I eat again? I'm getting so hungry. I'm only on like 900 calories a day. All right, do I have one big meal? Do I have two small meals? Oh, what do I do? Oh, shit. And it's hard. It is grating. As someone who was on a pretty much a consistent calorie deficit for 2 years, it takes its toll. And then there is a level of rebound after that is like, all right, now I can eat more. I'm just going to eat. I'm going to binge. I'm going to, smash it. So if you are eating, like, you want to eat as much as you can and still lose weight. It's called minimum effective dose, right? You want to have as little of a calorie deficit as possible that allows you to lose body fat, because that's going to give you mental space. Because, oh, guess what? I can fit a cheeseburger in every now and then. I can have a bit of pizza, or I can have a beer, and it's not going to affect me. Mentally, that makes you a hell of a lot better. And then guess what? Over time, all right, maybe I can probably have those things less frequently because I know the trade-off for them. And, as your calories get lower, or as you get smaller, physically smaller, so you require less energy, you might not be able to fit those things in, and that's okay. But you've got that room to play with. Whereas if you go, it's like throwing your best, your best fielder out there, your best batter straight up, and it gets bowled before before anything's had a chance to warm up. You want to save your tricks and save your adjustments for a little bit later in the process. Otherwise, you just end up burning the bridge initially. You're going way too hard, way too fast. You don't have the energy to train hard. You don't have the energy to keep it up consistently. And you're like, fuck, this is terrible and exhausting. As opposed to some of the dads I've been talking to, I've been coaching, they've been getting great results. He's like, man, I'm fuller than I was before, purely because he's choosing better food, but he's eating less calories. And he's like, I didn't realize I could actually diet like this. I didn't realize I could feel full and feel good and enjoy the food that I'm eating. And I think the other thing is some people just don't know how to fucking cook. They don't know how to flavor food. And that's why they think that dieting is such a hard chore, because they eat shit.
Mate, I completely agree. And touching on intermittent fasting a little bit, because it's something that actually comes up a lot. It's like, I have to be an intermittent fast to lose weight. It's like, well, no, you don't. Intermittent fasting or intermittent eating, whichever way you look at it, it's popularized by the 16-8 method, which is you fast for 16 hours a day, you eat inside an 8-hour window. So say you eat between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. each day. All it actually does, it stabilizes blood sugar levels a little bit. It might be a very, very small percentage increase in growth hormone, but all it really does is it gives you a smaller window to eat calories. And that's the biggest benefit of it. So when I go into calorie deficits for myself, I go out of maintenance, go into a deficit, I'll choose intermittent fasting. Because all I do is I cut out breakfast, and all of a sudden I just cut out 400 calories a day. And I eat the same lunch, I eat the same snack in the afternoon, I eat the same dinner. And all of a sudden I just go into my deficit by changing one thing. I'll go into deficit for 4 weeks, go into deficit 8 weeks, intermittent fasting. And then I'll come out of it. And it was just a very minor change. My dinners stay the same. My lunches stay the same. And all I did was cut my breakfast. And I cut out essentially, 2,800 to 3,000 calories a week, which is about half a kilo of fat a week. And I got my goals by intermittent fasting, but it wasn't. It's by calorie restriction. I just used the tool of intermittent fasting to deploy the principle of calorie restriction. So I think it's just understanding methods and principles always that calorie deficit to get the results we're after. That actually moves us into the next myth, which is hey, dude, you just said intermittent fasting, eating like 2 to 3 meals a day can help fat loss. I got told that I need to eat 6 meals a day. All we need is
Stroke the metabolism.
Exactly. I need to stroke that metabolism to get it up and running. If I eat more food and eat more meals often, increases the metabolism. I think this study, I believe it was in the late 90s when it came out, or maybe it was the early 90s, probably early 90s to be honest. What they looked at is the thermic effect of food. So every time, like when you eat food, there is a thermic effect of food. Your metabolism increases when you eat because it has to break it down through digestion. Protein has a higher thermic effect of food than the fats and the carbohydrates. That's why we lean also to slightly higher protein diets, and also it's more satiating. But what they looked at this is about average of about 10% thermic effect of food. So if I eat 6 meals a day, then what happened is the metabolism went up 6 times. And they're like, wow. So if we eat more often, 6 to 8 times a day, your metabolism will go up 6 to 8 times a day, which means you're going to burn more calories, which helps you lose weight. The thermic effect of food is done by, when we're looking at it, it's done by the total quantity of calories throughout the day. So it doesn't matter if you ate 2 900-calorie meals, or 6 300-calorie meals, or 3 400 and, 700, 600, 600-calorie meals. Geez, my math is not strong right now. 3 600-calorie meals. If we look at it, they all total to 1,800 calories. So your thermic effect of food is 180 calories for the day that you would burn. It doesn't matter if you do 6, 3, 2, they all have a similar fat loss benefit, providing the macronutrient ratio was similar and, inside each of those meals, whether it be 6, 3, or 2. The only difference I would say is if you're looking to truly put on lean muscle mass, then we want to have, essentially optimal protein intake every 4 hours. So that would be for ideal protein synthesis to gain lean mass. And that's like you can have a shake in the morning, you can have lunch at 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 4 p.m., 8 p.m., right? So that's every 4 hours. We're getting about 30 grams of protein in, and that's optimal for lean mass gain. But we're looking at fat loss, man, go for 2 meals a day. A couple of my guys do 1 meal a day just because that fits their lifestyle. Some of them do 4, some do 5. But what it is, it's what fits your lifestyle. So context, as you said earlier, context matters. The rule doesn't apply for everyone. Intermittent fasting works for me sometimes, doesn't work for other people. 1 meal a day works for some people, 6 meal a day works for others. Low carb works for some, high fat works for others. It is all up to the individual for us as a coach to determine what their constraints are and what tool or how to actually make sure them to adhere to the protocol, which is the calorie deficit, to achieve the result, which is fat loss that they're after.
Yeah, because some people will be hungry at different times of the day. And this is one of the reasons why I think that 6 meals a day tends to get perpetuated is people who try it. And number one, you're just fucking thinking about food all day long. That's like a meal every 2 hours. You finish eating a meal, you got in the next hour, you got to think about prepping and eating the next meal, the next snack. You never hit at that critical mass point of food in your stomach to signal that your body is full. So you think, I'm stroking metabolism because every couple hours I'm hungry. Well, that's because number one, you're not eating enough generally. Number two, your body does get to a rhythm where it starts to expect food at certain times. If you eat a certain amount each time every day and you eat similar amounts at certain times, your body's going to start to expect food at those times naturally. So if you go a little bit longer, oh my God, I'm so hungry. Yeah, my metabolism must be on fire. No, it's just because that's normally when you eat lunch, bro. For real. And they think that hunger is a sign of the metabolism, boosting or burning or whatever, but you never get full enough. And you're just constantly snacking, which does tend to promote, like snacking behavior tends to promote, it's like less favorable from a blood sugar and insulin resistance perspective, because you're just constantly spiking your blood sugar, constantly increasing that insulin, you're reducing your insulin sensitivity. And, over time, people who snack and remain in a calorie surplus constantly, that is one of the things that leads to diabetes, because you're constantly spiking your blood sugar, you're constantly releasing that insulin into your system, rather than giving yourself a bit of a space for your body to digest, have a break, blood sugar levels to come back down to normal, then eat food again, get another spike, get another release. So I would say that it's probably more it's more likely to be actively detrimental to try and eat 6 meals a day to quote unquote stroke the metabolism. So if you have heard that, think about it. It's visceral. Combine those 6 meals into 3, just double them up, right? Just say I'm eating 6 meals, but I just eat 2 of them at once. Hey, mentally works better for you. But that's a myth that's been around for so long that really needs to go away. The idea that meal frequency has any real impact on, especially fat loss, is such an old myth. But there are always new people coming into the industry. There are always new people who are starting their fitness journeys, and they're going down the rabbit holes that, to be honest, a lot of us went down in the initial stages around the low fat and the carb backloading and all the other different crap that you get when you first get into the industry. So don't feel bad if you've gone into any of these and you're like, oh, they're making fun of this, but I did this and it, kind of worked for me. It's like, it's all well and good. We all did this kind of stuff, but now that you know a little bit better, it's time to sort of look for the more sustainable and the more practical options for a lot of people.
Mate, 100%. I think I look at it like this. Well, 3 meals a day is 21 meals a week. If we have 6 meals a day, it's 42 meals a week. So if I'm looking at it, if I'm only eating 3 meals a day, it gives me less choices on a daily basis to fuck up. So like at the end of the day, if I'm choosing to eat less meals and I'm going 3 meals a day, then I have less decision fatigue. I don't have to rely on willpower less. It's going to be easier for me to stick to my protocol. So I think that is one of the big reasons I look at it as well. Now, there's 2 more myths left. I want to talk about you can't out-exercise a poor diet. People were just like, yeah, man, I'm not going to diet. I'm just going to train as hard as I possibly want. And you can't. Like I did a video to multiple videos over the last 20 years. And one was like, eating a double quarter pounder meal whilst running, I think about 10 to 12 Ks an hour on a treadmill. And, to the time it took me to eat the double quarter pounder meal, which was, I don't know, about 800, 900 calories, I ran, I think, a kilometer, and I was about to vomit at the same time as doing that. I was vomiting literally as I was about to smash down this quarter pounder. But 2, I'm eating like 800, 900 calories. And then at the same time, I burnt like 30 calories. So when we look at it, it's so easy to overconsume calories and so hard to out-train them that we shouldn't equate fat loss with training. We need to equate dieting. Remember, we diet to lose fat. We train to preserve muscle. If I can just drill that into your mind, that's the biggest thing I look at, because it's not about you can't out-exercise a poor diet. You can't do it for fat loss.
Yeah, it's a hell of a lot easier. And then my favorite one is it's a hell of a lot easier to not eat 200 calories than it is to burn 200 calories. There's 0 effort that has to go into just not eating the 200 calories. But the idea of eating the calories and then using out training them, don't get me wrong. The idea of, all right, I'm having a big night, it's a wedding, it's an event, it's a special occasion. I'm just going to have a little, I'm going to have whatever's on the menu. I'm not going to think about it. Okay, cool. And then as a result, I might go for an extra run tomorrow, right? That's a different story than the idea. And that's an idea of, more lifestyle balance, right? I know that we're going to be relatively inactive in this period, so I want to make sure I'm not going to eat a shit ton, right? That's when you get to that level of lifestyle maintenance. That's a different story than saying I'm going to out train and just kind of eat whatever I want and go on a dirty bulk. Because let me tell you, there's a reason a dirty bulk is a dirty bulk. You just end up gaining a shit ton of fat, and then you'd go to lose it and you lose all the muscle that you gained with it because you haven't done anything effectively. So the idea of out training is it's very difficult to burn enough. Like most people, and there was actually a podcast I listened to recently which talked about the idea of there's almost a compensatory effect of training. Like there's a maximum amount of calories that you can actually burn in training before your body starts to take that calorie burn away during your rest. So let's say at rest, like a day at rest, let's say you burn 1,800 calories, just as an example. And let's say when you train, you burn, or you move, you go for a run, whatever, you burn about 200 calories, right? So it totals about 2,000. What they're saying is that there's the threshold for people where if you went over the top of that, let's say you went, I'm just going to fucking smash myself today. And let's say you thought you burned, and let's say you have a wristwatch that tells you, I burnt 2,400 calories. So I burnt an extra 600 calories today instead of the 200. Let's say I did that. That extra 400 that you burnt is actually only going to be about 200, 250 maybe because your body's then got to recompensate for that. Because if you think from an evolution perspective, you go out, you hunt a saber-toothed tiger, you got to run, you got to, fight it, right? You got to burn a shit ton of calories in order to get that food. It doesn't make sense for your body to say, oh, that was a hell of a lot of extra calories you burned. Oh, well, it wants to recompensate for that when you're at rest, because it's like, well, I want us to be in a net calorie surplus because, hey, we're in starvation. We've got to fucking find and forage and hunt for food all the time. It doesn't make sense for every single time you go for an intense bout of movement. That is just pure calorie burn. So the more you train, you actually do tend to get a bit of diminishing returns in the amount of calories that you burn, whether it's at rest or even in the training session itself. So you just physically cannot outtrain that diet, because your body naturally wants to put on weight. It wants to retain its body fat stores, because it wants to store them up for winter, because we're in a space of abundance of it's so easy to overeat now, and our bodies are not prepared for it, mentally or physically, to deal with this much abundance of food. That's why mentally you have to prepare for it, and you have to be ready for it. And that means paying attention to your diet, and not just, because it's a hell of a lot easier just to, I'll train really hard and not care about what I eat. I know like 3 people in the world that can do that, and they're already rigs.
I would say the only way I could do that is last Sunday when I did this Spartan challenge with the boys.
Yeah.
I was doing it for 12 hours and 56 kilometers, and I burnt about 6,500 calories over that 12 hours. And, I consumed about 1,000 calories in liquids. Like if I did that every day, 100%, I could probably eat anything I wanted to eat. But it's like, you tell me someone who actually, one, could do that for 7 days a week and do the 56 kilometers, and they couldn't. One, they can't do that, and two, it's not really, that would be your life. You've got nothing else to do. But if we do look at this, like the Iron Cowboy, James Lawrence, I think it was like 52 Ironmans in 52 days. And like he was trying to suck in as many calories he possibly could, because when you're expending that much energy and you're doing an Ironman a day, yeah, for sure, you probably can outtrain a bad diet. But when we're looking at 99.9%, probably 0.99% of the population, they're training like 3, maybe 4 hours a week. And that 3 to 4 hours a week and sitting on their ass in front of their computer, doing their office job during the day, maybe hitting 8,000 steps, maybe 10,000 steps, there is no way they can outtrain a bad diet. I think for us, mate, that is the myths episode busted. So I'm hoping that, exactly. I'm hoping that everyone out there listening today but learned something, understood a bit more about the myths and why they are myths. And from this, you can take forth your knowledge, hit your protein content, make sure we're dieting to lose fat and training to preserve muscle mass, not go low carb, low fat. Just do what is in the context that best suits you. And as always, if you need coaching, if you want some help, you want to talk about what's holding you back with the results, go to fit-dad.club, book in a call with us, and let's have a bit of a chat and see how to get your results once and for all. And you can go to our free Facebook group or reach out to Jace or me on Facebook or Instagram. We can help you out. You got anything else to say, Jace? Oh, don't forget, Jace, you can tell them what they need to do now.
Yeah, leave a 5-star rating and review, and share the podcast with anyone who you think could benefit from it. We're here to help dads. That's what we do. So if you know anyone or you're married to one, share it to him, and we'll help you out. We'll help him out. I've already had a couple of people that have shared it with their husbands and all that kind of stuff. So if you have any mates, anyone that you think would benefit, just share it and let us know, and give us some ideas for anything future that you want covered, or any burning questions that you have. Shoot them through, and we'll be bound to cover them, because we want to know what you want to hear.
Exactly. All right, guys. Peace out. See you on the next episode. See you, Jason.
Take care.